All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to October 27th Delegate Office Hours. This is a weekly call where it's an office hours. Anybody could join, could ask questions. There is a random assortment of delegates that join. Sometimes there's one, sometimes there's two. Hell, sometimes there's 7 or 8. But today we have 2, Flipside Crypto and 3F Delegate. And the rest of us are just members of the organization in various regards. And so we don't have a set agenda for these calls. The participants are welcome to bring up any topic of interest. And so with that being said, yeah, happy to start the call. And if there's nothing to talk about, happy to do work in the background silently, because that's okay too. Nice. We have another delegate joining us, Tim Schupner. Tim, is your delegate named Shoopy, right?
It's Shoopy PLC, Private Limited Corporation.
Yeah. We're joined by Shoopy PLC. And also Mark Phillips, facilitator of the Strategic Finance Core Unit.
What's the topic this week?
So there is no set topic this week. It's just a pure office hours. Anybody joining can bring up anything. Which, by the way, Frank, maybe I'll start. Really huge. Man, I need to give you so much kudos for those videos that you do, the drinks with Maker Delegates. I've been really enjoying them, and your editing has been getting better and better. I like it.
Oh yeah, man. I actually took some of your advice about the sound effects being too loud, and I figured it out. And all the credit goes to Choopy PLC, who comes up with all these ideas. It's not really me, but it'd be nice to have an intern one day, right? That could do all this stuff, as opposed to me, since I'm getting too old to get as cool as some of you young people here. But yeah, man. So I guess we're celebrating the proposal, the passing of the Endgame, right? What were some of your takeaways? Anybody here from yesterday's BVC call? I think at the end, I don't know if I got too tired or I wasn't paying good enough attention, but I heard something about the surplus buffer being negative, and I think I saw a conversation on the general channel, on the Discord channel, about the same thing, a negative surplus buffer, which negates the ability to flap. I thought that's what I heard Rune say, flap, F-L-A-P, not flop. So I'm not sure anybody here can correct me, but it sounds to me we're not flapping anymore, assuming there is a parameter that keeps it negative at a certain threshold.
So just to clarify these terms, so I believe flop is to print MKR and sell it for DAI to recapitalize any like bad debt in the protocol, whereas flap would be the opposite. It would be buying MKR with excess surplus and burning it, which is the old buy and burn mechanism. And so yeah, curious if anybody has any insight into that. And just a point of clarity, the way that POVE passed in the pre-launch Endgame MIP set, it was only approved for a 20 million draw, right? It's not going negative in terms of like the actual amount in the surplus. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for clarifying that. You're right. It should have been flop. Thought I heard maybe his Danish accent got me there. Oh, he's Danish, right? Yeah. But yes, that's right. Flop. It's pretty much when you flop and you fall on your face and you have to mint MKR for bad governance, right? Bad management of the protocol. So yeah, and thank you for clarifying that on the POV, the protocol own emulator. So maybe we can discuss that because there's a lot to unpack there, right? We're looking at a possibility of having a negative surplus. I'm not sure if the community is used to running on a negative surplus, right? I've only seen it once. David, I think you also have only seen it once. That was in 2020.
Black Thursday.
Yeah, right. So that's going to be interesting. I don't know, Shupner, what do you think there? I mean, you're definitely more technical than I am.
Yeah, so if the DAF is eating up 20 million, then our system surplus will be around 57 million. So we are not on a negative surplus. We will actually never have a negative surplus. As soon as we go to a negative surplus, we start flopping again, and we would like to avoid that. But as long as we don't hit the surplus buffer, which is currently configured, I think like 250 million. So as long as the system surplus is below the surplus buffer of 250 million, we will just not do any MKR buyback and burning. And I mean, with the current burn rate compared to the income that the protocol is making, we are decreasing the system surplus by what, 50 something or not? Yeah, we are decreasing the system surplus constantly right now, as long as we are not going to, I don't know, cut expenses or start making a lot of income again, which is probably not a big deal from my point of view. So we still have some, but I mean, quite some budget left actually.
Yeah, I remember at least with the 80 mil that strategic finance was projecting a 3-year runway, and so with like 60 mil, we still have like a couple of years, right? And on top of that, looking at some of the budget proposals, there's a handful of cuts that are being done. For example, my team is proposing a 23% bottom line reduction in our budget. Sorry to dog food my team a little bit, but yeah, I think we're not in a bad spot. But I'm curious. Well, hold on.
Let me jump in for a second here.
Yeah, go for it. I'm not the pro.
Yeah, I mean, certainly give you credit, and you deserve credit for actually cutting your run rate. All these other core units are increasing their spend. It's being pitched under the guise of a budget reduction. And sure, if you budgeted for something that was completely unnecessary for your first year, 6 months, or whatever period, and then you're requesting a slightly lower budget, but your spend is 50% of that, that's going to result in an increased burn rate. So I really don't like how some of these budget MIPs are being framed.
Yeah, thank you for that. I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, also we should take into account that the system surplus is actually also meant as a risk mitigation thing, right? So theoretically, I mean, we're totally not sticking to this plan, but theoretically, every time we onboard something where we think there is a certain risk, like RWAs, for example, or it was even the idea for, I don't know, having something really big on L2s, for example, we shouldn't mint more, or should have a debt ceiling below the extra system surplus right now, which was the idea. So I don't know, back in the Denver days this year, there was the idea to actually artificially increase the system surplus by selling equity, which is probably, I don't know, I wouldn't do that given the valuation of MKR. So, but that would be a way to increase the system surplus, basically giving us ammunition or fuel to actually do more risky adventures, or to take more risk, essentially.
I guess I'm curious with the shrinking surplus buffer, with funds being allocated to the protocol vault, protocol owned vault emulator. Yeah, I guess like what are your views as delegates around like wanting to increase that risk capital, because you make a really great point, Tim. That was the original, that's the original risk buffer, right?
Yeah, I think something here that we need to maybe bring back into conversation. I think it was also during the November times that we're talking about having separate surplus buffers. Or essentially this idea that not everything comes from the same pot. So we have basically, I mean, this is just like on the, it doesn't need to be on the protocol level. It can just be on the management level of having basically different accounts, like treasury management accounts here. And we look at, this is what we expect to use for team expenses. This is what we use for, insurance funds, essentially. Because I think that's a good name for what we need for real assets. Because it's kind of like right now, if all current real asset deals fail, we're pretty much very much in the negative. So again, I'm not saying we need to be over collateralized on real assets, but we should have a good understanding of how much risk we have on those deals.
Yeah, but to a certain extent, those auditor wallets actually already serve that purpose. I mean, at least for a bit of runway. Not like this is the sum of auditor wallets is not like summing up to, I don't know, the expenses for the next year. But to a certain extent, those auditor wallets could be used for that.
Yeah, correct. I think there are currently, what is it, like 1 or 3 months of routine of expenses, right?
Yeah, I don't know the numbers, but between the auditor wallets, which have some amount of money, and also I guess operational wallets that have some amount of money, there's also like, I'm seeing 12 million DAI of claimable DAI in DSS vests, which hasn't been pulled from the surplus buffer yet. So technically speaking, if all of the core units and active streams pull their available DAI right now, we would be sitting at like a $65 million surplus buffer. So that 20 million draw would result in a $45 million surplus buffer. But a lot of teams obviously are just sitting on cash, and there's a lot of surplus, if I'm not mistaken, right, Mark?
I mean, just for the Reward Finance core unit, we have roughly 4 million sitting in DSS Vest. I mean, they haven't claimed, they are not going to get claimed, right? Right? So.
Right?
Right.
No worries, Mark. Yeah, I was just saying that a lot of the funds right now between the unclaimed DAI and DSS Vest and the DAI or fiat sitting in operational wallets and auditor wallets is surplus, right? Like people are grabbing their budgets, but their actuals are some amount less than their actual budgets.
Tying this back to the end game, right? Because that is the next stage. And getting back to the protocol owned vote emulator, or whatever you want to call it, this is all going to change, right? Because again, that's how we kick this off, this conversation. We're looking at going at a negative surplus buffer and using any excess to go out there and buy some stake ETH, which, you know, some might be a proponent of, some might not be. I guess I just kind of want to know what the parameters are for that and how negative it should go and how, again, the community is going to react to that. As far as budgets, there's a lot of them coming up in the next couple of governance cycle, I think all the way running to maybe January, February of 2023. I think a lot of these core units, unfortunately, as the protocol pivots into the end game, are going to have to kind of improvise and start thinking about the clustering, the ecosystem actors, maybe even third-party providers. Because I think one thing that we failed, and you know, during yesterday's discussion with Nadia, I forgot to ask her, and there's something she told me when I saw her in Bogota, that every individual in this DAO is an independent, we're just independent entities, if you think about it, right? Like every single one of us, we don't work for a company. This is a DAO, and we're all free to do whatever we want. And, I think a lot of core unit team members forget that. I don't blame them because, growing up through society, you already are conditioned to think that you're going to work for a corporation or a company. But instead, now we're in a different paradigm. We're in a DAO. And as the end game comes around the corner, we're all just going to have to think like, how do we cluster into either meta DAOs or as ecosystem actors? So a lot of those budgets, it's going to be interesting to see how the delegates react to them, whether they're going to get a big yes or a big no. And yeah, it's gonna be definitely interesting in the next 6 months, in my opinion, how things are going to shape out, the surplus buffer, and how this MIP 84, the POV, plays into it.
Yeah, I guess to fill in some more context with regards to the POV, I don't think anything's actually happening until the DSS kiln completes like a final audit and is deployed for this purpose. So I think we might hear from Derek on that in the coming weeks. Not unfortunately, he's not going to speak on today's governance and risk call, which is right after this. But yeah, there's still some steps to be had before we actually deploy the capital. By the way, I'm curious what your understanding is of EtherDAI. So my understanding is right now, the way that the MIP launched, POV would be buying Lido's ST ETH, but that eventually it would switch to this thing called EtherDAI, and EtherDAI is a like maker bespoke wrapped ST ETH. Am I understanding that correctly? I would love to get some more understanding on that.
Yeah, I believe it's a synthetic of wrap stake ETH. So essentially just forking stake ETH and wrapping it, or Lido stake ETH. But it's just a synthetic of Lido's stake ETH.
So do you know what's the purpose of that? Why not just stick with stake ETH?
Diversification. I think right now Coinbase and Lido, right, play a big role in stake ETH. But go ahead, Josh. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think I asked Arun about that, and I think the idea is that like we'd have multiple providers of staked ETH, like the what's it called, RETH, and so either DAI would be like a like be able to be backed by staked ETH or RETH or whichever provider is providing the staked ETH.
Yeah. One interesting thing is, I don't know if you guys have seen like the Liquid Collective. It's a bunch of different node providers and custody who's trying to create an index of these staked ETH products. So it's like Coinbase, it's Kraken, it's this company called Alluvial, and they're trying to build a similar product. As for wrapped stake ETH, a lot of people are actually saying it embeds into DeFi better just because of the smart contracts. I don't understand that as well, but on the Aave side, we're actually looking at listing wrapped stake ETH over staked ETH on V3 just because it embeds better into the protocol.
What was the name of that? I'm sorry, I missed that. And you're saying that they're taking the centralized stake ETH and wrapping it into DeFi?
Yeah, it's called the Liquid Collective. It's a pretty big project. They've been doing kind of some private fundraising, but it's also from a bunch of, centralized exchange and custodians as well. It's Alluvial, Coinbase Cloud, Figment, Rome, Blockchain Labs, Kraken, Staked, and more.
A lot of the staking facilities, yeah, familiar with those. Interesting. Thanks, man. I'll look into that. And also, getting back to the DVC call from less than 24 hours ago, there was, I kind of felt like there was a discussion there about, the protocol engineering team looking to, obviously, a portion of the protocol engineering team wants to automate a lot of this stuff. And that's super wonderful, right? Like, hopefully, eventually, 5, 10, 15 years from now, everything will be automated. But one thing that came up was setting rates, and it was interesting to hear because it feels like the MOMC, and sorry about this, Tim Schupner, but it sounded to me like eventually, that the MOMC, and I'll tell you straightforward, there were some people that sometimes are not happy with you guys, always changing rates up and down, what have you. I actually value you guys. I think you guys do a good thing, right, for the protocol. But getting back to automating all of that, do you think that's possible by using the IM module to automate all this stuff and eventually getting rid of the MOMC?
So first of all, the MOMC is just the only incarnation of those parameter proposal groups. So if everybody is just not satisfied with the proposals we are doing, everybody is free to create their own parameter proposal group and just propose something different. I think a lot of stuff can actually be automated. So for example, if we would want to have, I don't know, flexible tins or touts on PSM, depending on the utilization, that's something that could be totally done with an instant access module. But there is a certain dimension that at least the Maker Open Marketing takes into account, which is the assessment by the risk guys. So I don't know, the proposal is not up yet, so I'm not going to leak too much about that. But if, for example, one of the collaterals that we're having is having severe liquidity problems, or we think it's in a pretty desperate state in terms of it's hyped too much, so it's actually not correctly evaluated. I mean, markets are not, well, we don't need to dig into that. That stuff is not something that you can compute on-chain. Or maybe to a certain extent you could, but it's probably not worth the effort of doing that. So I think there is a certain component, or there are certain components right now that's which is going to make it pretty hard to automate everything. Also, you have to take into account that there is always engineering effort in building up those instant access modules. So I don't know, I mean, do we rather want to build instant access modules to get rid of people thinking about stuff? Or do we want them to, I don't know, work on EtherDAI, for example, or something like this? I mean, the amount of, or the capacity that we have on the engineering side is limited pretty heavily, I'd say. So automation is great, but it should just, the value we get out of automation does need to justify the effort that we put into. But there are definitely things that we could automate. But I mean, right now for the fee in, fee out on PSM, there's actually not that much that we need to change, and we haven't changed that much so far. I mean, we could also do something. I actually was doing even a premium on that, having an instant access module on the systems in the surplus buffer, because this could be also some kind of function based on, I don't know, the capital at risk versus whatever. This could totally be something permissionless. But as we're not changing the system surplus buffer anyway right now, I mean, we haven't, since we updated it to 250 million, nothing has changed there. So there's really no point in automating something. You automate things that are changing constantly and where it's making sense. But right now it's, I don't know, we are meeting usually every 4 weeks. You might say that it's all rubbish what we produce. I don't think so. But yeah, I don't think the effort is justifying the value that we get out of that.
I mean, votes would indicate that you have quite a lot of support for that committee. So
yeah, but there are also no alternatives, right? So I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe
about to say.
if you would have two or three other parameter proposal groups dealing with the same set, or some kind of overlapping set of parameters, maybe that would change. But so far, nobody was really interested in creating that. Yeah, I actually would love to see that, because it's not really decentralized how we're dealing with this stuff right now. But yeah, not a primary problem, obviously.
And just to clarify, I think Rune was referring to using the instant access module for things where a certain collateral type goes over, a large amount, and then automatically it raises the stability fee, right? Say from 1% to 1.5, and that's just automated. So
yeah, totally doable. I mean, to a certain extent, we do this manually in the Maker Open Market Committee, right? If we see that a certain collateral is above the modeled risk debt ceiling, then we need to do something about this. So yeah, but I mean, it's not like those things need to get changed directly. It's most of the times it's okay if it takes, I don't know, 2 weeks or something, which is the amount of time that we need actually. So even if you would meet now and say, okay, we need to propose changing, I don't know, the stability fee of ETH again back to 5% or something like this, it will just take 2 weeks until it's actually live, at least. Because it takes a couple of days when it's on the forum, then it takes a couple of days being on chain on the poll, then it takes at least 10 days until it's on an executive. Maybe if you can fast track it, it's just 3 days or something like this. But so far the pain on that point is not big enough to actually do that. But yeah, totally, stability fees could be made up on a function based on utilization of a collateral or an ILK. So that's doable.
Tim Shuppy, what's your thoughts about like teams like Gauntlet who are trying to do this and kind of like monopolize, risk parameters for protocols? Like, do you think there's a future for them in Maker, or it should be kind of people like yourselves kind of owning this process and working with other contributors?
Might be stupid, but I have no idea what they're actually planning. Maybe you can explain a bit.
They do risk parameters. I don't know their exact model. They have big contracts at Aave. They have big contracts at Benki. They have they have a lot of big contracts kind of across different protocols. But what they are doing is exactly what you say: risk parameters as a service.
Yeah, but we actually have the risk core unit, which I value very much. I think those are very bright brains there, and they are doing a good job. So for me, it sounds like Gauntlet is doing that as a service, what the risk core unit is doing. And of course, the risk core unit is very valued input for the Maker Open Market Committee. A lot of times it's, we are following the proposals of the risk core unit, especially when it comes to situations like, oh, we think this asset is actually too risky and we should do something about this. Then it's usually the risk core unit actually bringing this to the table.
Cool, thank you.
Switching gears, so the Gemini USD, big news, right? In the last 24 hours as well. Getting filled up over 100 million in the PSM, GUSD PSM. But one thing I will say, and I know we have a couple of the individuals here from CES, I believe I saw Robert, and I saw a couple of the strategic finance folks here. Thanks for joining us. But I want to say, first of all, congratulations, great job, every single one of you guys, and also the growth team and anybody else that was involved. But you kind of see it in live that there's a lot of lack of communication between teams. As how something is going to a collateral type or how something is going to get onboarded or what have you. And I was just wondering if you guys are, what you guys are thinking when the end game does get implemented and there's a couple of clusters that become approved MakerDAOs in the end game plan. Is this going to change where there's going to be better communication, or should we still expect to kind of have teams doing different things, and then when something comes to the table, everyone has a different idea? Because I think, you know, you guys did a great job, but then like this morning, just watching everybody interact and how the fruits of the labor for the GUSD PSM and this proposal from Gemini, you know, how to get the goods, whether to do it to the DSS blow or write a new smart contract. You know, just watching this discussion makes me realize that in 2022, like core units are still not communicating with each other. So I'm just wondering how you guys thinking about that.
Frank, I don't think it's a matter of communication. I think that there is, it's the pattern that I've observed, and I'll talk a little bit about this today in the GNR to give some thoughts about CES and next steps as it relates to the end game. And I'll more directly address your question in the way of what happens with the MakerDAOs, and at least my opinion, based upon MIPS 83. But for this particular situation, this is our pattern as a DAO. This is not to call anyone specific out. It's just the way it works, is that a deal gets proposed and the deal gets posted, and then there are details behind the deal. And because we're all independent thinkers, we have our own opinions on what we believe needs to be done based upon our domain experience. Right. So yes, we look at it, we look at something and say, how do we make sure this is stable, secure, and at the same time, don't introduce a lot of friction into the process? Because, you know, we all understand why we're doing what we're doing right now, right? There's no question there. And so, you know, we have our coordination call, but people have the ability to have different opinions on how something needs to get done. There's no way to control that, and there's no desire to do that either. So as we get into the details of the implementation, we're mired in that with every single deal. And regardless of how simple something is presented for any RWA deal, it's not simple. So we're dealing with the low-level details, and then there are other opinions that come in, and we agree to disagree. So a lot of this shows up inside of the forums and Discord. So I think there's just it's a natural, healthy discussion. I would love to have that in the CSI calls on Monday as we go through that, but sometimes it doesn't happen there and it becomes public. So, and also, you know, sometimes the solution that's being presented doesn't introduce the friction. In fact, it can make a deal go quicker, but we have different opinions on that. So I don't know what the solution looks like. I don't know where improvements can be made. I think we have the necessary constructs set up to have the discussions. It would be nice maybe if we had those discussions up front and are clear on that. But a lot of times the deals that come in, we don't know the details. So it's really hard to say how an implementation might work until we get the actual details. And along the way, you're going to see a lot of discussion, hence Rune's comment today or yesterday. And so I don't know how to interpret that other than Rune is the primary voter right now. Therefore, we're going to revert back to what he's suggesting in his reply. So it's just my comments and thoughts about what I see.
I appreciate that. And you know, I think that you guys are at least every single team, right? Strategic finance, even protocol engineering with Sam and CES. You guys are sorting through it, right? Because a lot of companies, when they have a strategy, they don't know how to execute it. In other words, they say they have a strategy, which is pretty much like an ambition, right? Like I have an ambition to maybe one day go watch Manchester United versus Manchester City. But if I don't sort through how I get to that game, it's never going to happen. So at least you guys are sorting through the barriers, the obstacles that are in front of the protocol. So I appreciate that. I was just wondering how the end game is going to change this when every cluster becomes a MetaDAO, then each MetaDAO has its own governance, and each MetaDAO is responsible for onboarding something like the GUSD PSM. It's going to be super interesting. And and then eventually 10 years from now, I see, maybe 500 MetaDAOs, hopefully, and then 500 MetaDAOs working either with each other or competing against each other. It's going to be super interesting, but yeah, it's early for that. So.
Yeah, I'm not understanding the comment in the chat. Could you?
Yeah,
I mean,
think
I
he's speaking
commented-
mainly about GUSD, and I don't think there is any deed agreement on GUSD. So
Yeah, and my comment on a couple of GNR calls ago was that, hey, there's work to do here. And the response was, no, there isn't. Like, okay, we can agree to disagree there. And if there's a different approach, I mean, strategic finance has the mandate. So please feel free to do what you want to do. I'm just trying to make it clear from a perspective of when we're doing implementation, there's a lot of things to consider. And there are potentially quick ways to do something and workarounds, and I get it. But we also, as it relates to building, we talk about a more robust solution in the future, but we really don't. I mean, it's not really what we do here, and it hasn't been the culture. So we just get things done quicker. And I understand the need, by the way. So I'm not trying to provide resistance. But it's never as simple as we make it to be, at least the way, for me, it's represented in the forums and Discord. So that's my only comment there.
yeah, I just want to be sure that we are not saying that we want to move forward at whatever cost and not take care of things, because it's not at all what we are. We don't have a pattern of this. I mean, if you look all my work on real world assets, I was reporting. I published reporting on MIP 65 already, made some work here. And that's not just implementation, that's the whole collateral management life. So I think we agree on the fact that we want to do a proper job, to focus on priorities. We might just want to disagree, or agree to disagree if you want, on how much processes, how much meetings, how much people, and how much action. I don't know.
Yeah, there's no intention on my part to say that people are trying to do something, to hurt the protocol. The pattern that I see is that we get deals and there's a lot of details to work through, and sometimes it's hard to know what to do, and there's a lot of different opinions on how to proceed. And then we build up to the actual, like, for example, I know we're trying to figure out, for example, the deal terms with Block Tower and Centrifuge, and working through that. And there's just a lot that goes on, and there's different opinions on how potentially that can be implemented. I think people are working in good faith, but it's just an example of how we typically work here at MakerDAO. We figure it out as we go along, and then we get to a conclusion, and then we agree upon an implementation, and then we move forward.
Yeah, perhaps things get lost in translation, right? Communicating on Discord is not the best platform, in my opinion. But also, we saw Kurt Barry from Protocol Engineering coming on and suggesting that there should be work put into getting a smart contract to hold the MIP 81, the USDC, in a smart contract as opposed to in a custodial wallet at Coinbase. And then obviously we saw a different opinion from Rune, I believe this morning, I'm not sure, but yeah, it's, 3F Delegate is a proponent of having a smart contract for this. And I know it, yes, I agree that it's going to take some work and it's going to kind of delay things. But I don't know if anybody here has a different point of view on that, any other delegates. It would be nice to innovate, right? And from my end, I wish it could happen in 24 hours, but that's not realistically. But then I do see that Sam says it's going to take maybe 10 lines of code. So that's refreshing. So yeah, I was wondering how anybody felt about that. If we should make a push towards a smart contract that can hold that USDC PSM.
Frank, there's a contract that we've already shared with Coinbase. And so I think the question for us is to say, if one approach is to follow the smart contract, how can we estimate the amount of work that would take to onboard the deal? And then compare that to, if we didn't do that and we set up an entity, what's going to take longer, right? I think that to expedite this and get it through the system as best as possible or as quick as possible is in all of our best interest, but I'm not sure which way is quicker. So that's the question I have for this, well, not so much this team, but it's the question I have.
Wait, is it a question of speed or is it a question of risk? I think it's a question of risk.
Right. And so I had heard from the community that there was a really big concern about risk. And so to try to address that, this is the approach that we proposed. And then, so I'm not sure, I mean, there's a group of delegates on this call. How would we interpret Rhune's comments on this particular issue?
May I ask him?
I hear you, and it seems clear right now.
Could also be, and this is just my, I'm just speculating here. Could also be that, that no company in their right mind, and obviously this is not a company, but no, even individual, right? Individuals shouldn't have like $100,000 under their bed mattress or sitting at JP Morgan Chase doing nothing, like collecting dust and having JP Morgan run circles around the real world with that money, right? So it could also be a thing where, there's 3 billion plus in the PSM for, I don't know, feels like it's been years now. And that money is not working, right? It's not working for the protocol. It's not earning anything. And at this point, most folks that understand custodial services understand that they do work, right? Like companies like JP Morgan, again, they're not in the business of rugging people with their custodial services. And it's a matter of whether it's going to take, another 3 months to get MIP 81 off the ground or get that PSM USDC to go to work. So it's all about timing. Every day that goes by, the protocol loses money. So I kind of understand why Rhune wants to get this done already. And then the proposal, the MIP that was put together, there are some interesting points there. If you look closely that, Coinbase wants to try this out the old fashioned way, but they are open, right? Which is super cool. And especially that, they're working with you guys at CES to hopefully get some type of innovation going. But I see Patrick's hands up. Sorry, Patrick, go ahead.
That's okay. Thank you, Frank. So I'm just going to echo or respond to what Robert said. I think Rhune's comment isn't particularly complex. He said he wants the MIP enacted as written, which is not a technical solution. So that's what he wants to happen. And this is kind of what we were flagging prior to this vote, right? That this MIP does not provide for technical solutions. That's what GovAlpha said, and that's what CES said. It's been approved. Okay, so now we need to make it work. But I think that's quite clear what he's trying to say.
And again, I mean, that may be one another example where we spend a lot of time discussing details because one does not have the full understanding of the situation. I mean, I fully agree with Rhune that we should move the deal as fast as possible. And I mean, everyone would agree on that front. But we will not make the deal in any case, probably before the end of the year. So we have plenty of time to develop the smart contract. Except if Robert says that, well, 2 months is not enough to deploy a new smart contract, yeah, sure, then we have a problem. But other than that, there is no problem. And I'm not saying we should take any shortcut. I mean, we have the time, we have other issues, and we don't need to focus on an issue that we don't have. And we can discuss as much as we want. Should we go now or should we wait for a smart contract? Well, the fact is that we cannot go now. And we will have plenty of other problems because you need an arranger that is willing to do it. What if the arranger wants to take a cut because that's not in the MIP, but the arranger might want to get some fees because he's doing a work. So he wants to be paid. And there's plenty of problems. And that's all the real world asset deals. There is no simple plan, but it's not complicated. It's just a lot of issues that you have to solve one by one. But you start to solve the first one, the most pressing one, and the smart contract one, I think for CS is a good idea. We should work on it. And if it's, I guess it will be done before the legal implementation, so there is no problem. So no need to create problems where we have none. And if you need a MIP 4 to change the MIP, so it goes well with, because we are changing the implementation to have something safer. I mean, everyone will agree that it's better to be safer if it doesn't delay anything.
So you're right, Seb, there are other dependencies needed here, such as the legal assessment. But it would be a lot better to, in my opinion, to thrash out a lot of these things before passing a MIP rather than after the fact, which I think is the point Robert was making.
Oh yeah, on that I fully agree. I mean, but even the arranger, I mean, you have no idea how much work is done in the background, and no arranger will take any time on this project if it's not approved. Because why would you spend $500,000 for something that will not see the light? It's not easy. Why would you do it? So that's the whole problem of working with DAOs, working on complex things, and we need to have take and give. But I fully agree that how the MIP process is working right now is not ideal, but that's life. And I could write a MIP to make it better, but I will not because it's not my main target for now. And it's working quite well if you have some flexibility. Because we are dealing with, I don't know, complex organizations. So there are some, with a bit of flexibility, everything is easier.
So I agree with everything you're saying, right? But MIPs shouldn't be flexible. MIP should be specific. That's actually in MIP 0. So we shouldn't be having to interpret MIPs after the fact that they're passed. We should be interpreting MIPs before they're passed, so we know, so everyone knows what's going to happen. No one knew once this MIP was passed, all right, now CES are going to go and develop a technical solution because that wasn't in the MIP. So I agree with your points. I agree we have time, but in general, we shouldn't be looking to be flexible with ratified MIPs. That's not how MIPs are designed to work.
Oh, yeah. Well, core units are autonomous, so they can do whatever they want. And there is plenty of MIPs that should be implemented and they weren't. So not the end of the world. I mean, if we need to write a MIP 4 to make everything happy, we'll write a MIP 4.
Yeah, the way that I read Rune's response is pretty clear, and I'm not sure that there's, from a CES perspective, I'm not sure that there's work to continue to move forward at this moment.
I mean, to your defense, Robert and your team, the greater DeFi community would want a smart contract, but the MIP was written that way, right? So, you know, yeah, there's going to be a lot of, you know, I get it, right? MakerDAO is a protocol for business to business. This is not a business to consumer. Sorry, for consumers, what have you, retail, whatever you want to call them. So, you know, that's just gonna have to roll with the punches, right? Because I spend some part of my daily life in a lot of these Telegram groups, and a lot of these folks are not fans of MakerDAO. I can tell you that, but it is what it is. Yeah.
I mean, just to be clear, so this is a great example of figuring things out as we move forward, right? So there's new information that's been presented. Thanks, you know, Patrick, you know, from a GovAlpha perspective, there's an opinion with that. You know, Seb has shared his opinion. I look at it and I have to form my own opinion. And when I read what has been written, to me, it seems very clear that Rune wants to stick to the MIP, which means that it's not a smart contract solution. So at this moment, my decision is that, okay, I don't know the next step because it seems like there's a lot of work from a legal and maybe deal perspective. Whatever's listed in the MIP would need to get done. I'm happy to support if there are technology updates or changes to the current technology to support this, we will do that. But at this moment, it seems like the next step is to figure out, is there an arranger? Is there a legal structure needed? What are those next steps? And I don't have that for the folks on this call.
And another point, Patrick, because just to be in line with the governance, now that some sub-facilitator have some superpower, Robert can say, I will not put anything regarding MIP 81 if it's not following my smart contract that I think is better. And then we are done. So we don't even have to make a modification of the MIP because Robert can decide whatever he wants.
Well,
Thanks
yes and no, but you have to look at the realpolitik for Robert as well. If he refuses to do something, he's risking getting offboarded as a core unit or as a facilitator. So, well, technically, yes, governance there's a sword of Damocles kind of hanging over him if he refuses to carry out instructions of governance.
Yeah, but again, we are making a big political mess because Rune want to have something quick, and he will not get it quick in any case. So we have time to implement the smart contract. So Rune will be happy. Everyone will be happy, actually. The process will be followed. Robert might want to have to just write a sentence saying, well, no, we will make the smart contract. And he can even say, well, Seb says so, if you want. And we are good.
I've had
All
just
right, folks, just want to jump in here. We are at almost 3 minutes at the top of the hour. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and give over the host privilege to Artem, who will stay past the hour if you guys want to continue discussing. But we do have the governance and risk call starting shortly, and I, as the host, have to run. So, yeah, gonna end it here, guys. Thank you for the really rich conversation.